Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I apologize for the slow Wi Fi, but you can hear me on our global podcast where we talk about global affairs, innovation, an increasingly turbulent world politically and economically. And today, I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the Union. Morrisville actually just got named as one of the top cities to do business in America. And we're going to talk today. My monologue today was going to be about India, but I might move that tomorrow because we're going to talk about India and what the ambassador's visit was like on tomorrow's show. But today, the breaking news is Joseph R. Biden, the president of the United States, the current president of the United States, yesterday announced, or actually this morning, that he will be seeking a second term in the White House. Biden announces this on the day where he announced 4 years ago when he was running for president. The scrappy presidential candidate from Scranton, Pennsylvania, won a surprising primary victory in South Carolina to turn the tides in the presidential election and finally claim the dream of his own late son, Beau Biden. His father would be the president of the United States. As Biden declared his candidacy for a second term, he cited the fact that it's a battle for the soul of America, and he could not stand by if Donald Trump wins the nomination, which is likely going to happen, and wins the presidency back. So it does look like this announcement is a launch of not only Joe Biden's presidential campaign, but a beginning of the presidential race of 2024, which many of us predict will be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, round two of the first presidential election of 2020. Biden will make an argument that the economy has gotten a little bit better, although it will be a challenge with inflation and gas prices continuing to rise, the war in Ukraine, an unstable world. He has much going against him, but he's going to try to tout his accomplishments and the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. But Republican critics say that he's just too old. Only 26% of Democrats believe he should run again for a second term. Surprisingly enough, only 27% of Republicans believe Donald Trump should run for a second term. So a majority of their supporters in both parties, more than a majority, do not want to see either of these men run for the highest office. Does that mean that we're going to be some surprises coming in last minute? Only time will tell. This will be an exciting show where we talk a lot about this debate today of Joe Biden running again and other news around the world. Please join me now in welcoming Mark Lee. We're going to go through some issues going around the world. I have to check my Washington Post 7, which I use. No, Dan Worthington, I'm not using the Mark. I'm using a mixture of CNN, Post, and other things to get that breaking news.
Well, CNN and New York Times, my goodness.
Well, no, I do I mix. Actually, I use AP News sometimes as the most.
I know, and that's really turned left too. It's terrible.
Not too much. AP News is a little bit more. Give you just the facts.
Yeah, it's about like NPR, right?
Hey, good morning, Steve. I have a question about that announcement by Biden. Was it live or recorded?
I think it was recorded.
I believe
what he's asking is he still alive?
Is he still, not so much that, but how much that was edited, photoshopped? Why can't he just do a live interview or a live announcement? I think it's pathetic. I think it's telling that he can't just be live and just even reading our teleprompter. And one other point I heard, and I think it's been confirmed, there's no primary debates on the Democratic side. I mean, what is that saying about he can't hold an interview? He can't hold a debate?
There may be things going on we don't know about. I will say that I did meet the president briefly at Wolfspeed. One thing I noticed is that he's not very comfortable speaking from a teleprompter, and so it might just be that it's just not going to look as good.
Well,
Steve, I get that. Just speak from your heart. Just speak from your heart. I have no problem. You have no problem doing that.
The other thing about my father, who's a doctor, noticed that in his trip to Ireland last week, a couple of times, if you watch the president, he kind of runs quickly to get to the next destination. And sometimes that could be a symptom of what they call like ambulation of the legs. And sometimes, people with Parkinson's, they can't take long steps anymore. Now, I did notice when I met the president, I was within less than a few feet of him. he did not seem to have any shaking of the hands, of the face, of the just he did seem to be alert, and the eyes were awake, and he didn't look like he was kind of like a.
That was the Botox.
But no, but sometimes when you see someone with dementia, there's this blank stare. So I will say the president didn't have that. So I do think the mind is intact. The question is, does he have the energy to to be in this office at 80 years old? Heck, I'm tired and I'm 51. I got out of the city council meeting at 11, and I tried to run this morning, and I just wasn't running. I usually run about a 7.5 minute pace, 8 minute pace, and I just couldn't do it this morning. I wanted to just crawl back into bed, and I'm 52. So, how could you be 80 and run the country? But what do you think, guys?
Good question.
Well, let's dive in. We're going to spend a few minutes on this. What do you think? First of all, Bobby Kennedy, Jr. or whatever is thinking about running another Kennedy.
Why not?
Sure.
But I just don't know whether he did mention a number of co-chairs of the campaign committee, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a few others.
Winners.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know. Anyway, first let's talk about. Okay, this is going to be. Now I know what Dan Worthington's answer is going to be. Don't run again. But if you were in the Oval Office or in the Situation Room advising the president, and I'm going to start with Mark Lee. Mark, what would you tell him that he has to do now if he's got any chance of lifting those numbers up and showing, it's hard to go from 20% to, even move the needle 10%. But any advice of what he has to do against Donald Trump? Because I think Trump has a good case about making it about the economy and the state of the world affairs, because both are worse now than when Biden took the oath of office.
I mean, the main thing is he's got to address the independents, because that's going to be the deciding factor in just about any election and all in that space. So, yes, he definitely has to find out things that are going on well in the economy and those and talk about those. Mark, and definitely, hold on a second, Dan, and definitely if he is going to definitely bring in other things as well, then that's what he's got to address. So there are definitely some constituencies, even in his own constituency, that I don't think that he has adequately addressed some of the issues that they are concerned about, whether that is the African-American population or the Hispanic population or a number of other populations that are out there. So he's definitely got to find a way to address folks on that side as well. So definitely got to build up his own base as well as, because I don't know that his own base is comfortable, as you've just said, with his running. I know a lot of folks that do not want a race between almost two 80-year-olds and all in that space. They want to hear a younger voice from both sides of the party and all in that, both parties, I'm saying.
There's Jack, I got you up.
Jack's up, and they definitely want to find out how that can happen. So I think that if he's going to win, he's got to solidify his own base. I mean, what is he saying to the farmers? We have a very rural parts of North Carolina, but there are rural America all over the place. So he's got to figure out how he's going to address the issues of the farmers and the manufacturers and a number of other folks that are part of that middle America and all in that space. So I think that there are a number of issues that he can talk about and maybe even show some wins if he can find those wins to highlight what they are in order to a victory. So, like I said,
we have our conservative analyst from down under, Shaquille Latimer. Shaquille, you've just got to be so excited that Joseph R. Biden is seeking a second term. Do you think this is political suicide? Mr. Latimer, do you think this is political suicide, or he has any chance of rising in the numbers, or is it just the economy is too bad that he's not going to be able to dig himself out of this hole?
I wouldn't call myself a conservative, but look, I actually think that Biden will do better than expected. He's probably buoyed by the midterm results, so that's probably given him a little bit more energy behind him. I think the Republicans are doing a pretty poor job of explaining what it is that they want to do. What's their plan for the future of the country? They seem to be pointing out all the problems, all the issues, the things that are going wrong, but they're not really saying what their alternative plans actually are. With Tucker Carlson leaving Fox News, the populist voice on cable networks is gone. I don't think there's anybody that has his kind of pull or influence. Now, obviously, he's very helpful to the Republican Party, and he's also very helpful to a populist like Donald Trump. So if we do see a rerun of the 2020 election, I don't think it's going to be quite as cut and dry as it might appear. I think that on a sore spot for Joe Biden is going to be the things going on with Hunter. Donald Trump can say, look, when I was the president, we didn't have these wars with Russia and Ukraine. We had relative stability around the world. We didn't have rampant inflation, which obviously Biden will blame on COVID, and that sort of thing. So he's going to talk about his record versus Joe Biden's. Joe Biden's probably going to say to him, well, would you accept this election this time? The settlement with Fox News and Dominion counting systems really undermines the main sort of issue that was being brought up by people who had a problem with that election. So, I don't think Republicans are out of the park yet.
I think
is
really
an issue. A tough road ahead of them.
The pay-to-play issue
it is
really an issue. The 50 so-called
it is, Dan, but
I mean, that is just corruption. That's Watergate all over again.
Well, real quickly before we go,
it certainly is going to be an issue, but by the time we fast forward to the 2024 election, it's old news.
Well, he might be impeached before that.
You're going to need, I think, something more. Like Republicans, when they're polled, and people in general, when they're polled, aren't too worried about January 6th anymore. I think issue anymore. I think it will have been dealt with. Certainly, there's talk of Hunter Biden potentially being indicted this week. I think that the process is going to play out, and it's not going to be a quick one. That'll take a while. So I think it'll be old news.
Well, but more to the point, what happened was that Biden used Blinken to contact these 51 supposed intelligence sources to call the laptop story and the corruption story Russian propaganda. And these guys are all working for the administration now, all 51 of them. It's sort of like Watergate on steroids, right? Corruption on steroids. This guy cheated and manipulated the American public in very, very deliberate and calculated ways that were also illegal. And I think it's a public offense. I mean, what I mean is, okay, so Trump is doing whatever he does with bimbos in 2007, right? And that's what this case is all about. They both screwed up with classified information. The difference is Trump was president and original classification authority at the time he screwed up. Biden was not. He was a VP and had no original classification authority. And you see all these criminal acts and the money flow in the Biden crime syndicate. I mean, it's very clear that went on and that happened, that he used his position as vice president to create a flow of money and funds coming to him from foreign countries, many of whom are our enemies. And they did this as a conspiracy. It was deliberate. It was methodical. And I don't know what in the hell he was thinking, how he could get away with this. I know the Clintons got away with it for many years until she lost. But the point is that that's public corruption. All of Donald Trump's crap that they're trying to get him on now is old stuff and private business stuff. It has nothing to do with public corruption.
I'm going to go back.
Dan, I think that all that being said, I think that somebody like Joe Biden, anybody who's a president, has enough contacts, has enough people. Somebody else will take the fall for it, not him. Somebody else will be.
I know it's corruption, though, at the highest places.
And perhaps, but one of the things that I think is a real concern is many people in the FBI, the guy has just gone for whistleblower protection, etc., complaining about how slow it is to actually bring about charges on Hunter Biden, that sort of thing. And I think it's a big flaw in the American system that this is something that has to be done by the executive, but the executive is run by the very people you're investigating. What do you do? And I think that that's probably something that'll have to be addressed in the future of the United States.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Now, let me ask you one thing before we go back into some other issues. I'm just going to throw this out there. I think a lot of it comes down to the messaging to independents. In any election, you got to have a why of why you should be reelected. And so if I'm out there, the average Joe and independent, I don't know if I'm going to worry so much about woke issues on the left or conspiracy theories or election being rigged on the right. It obviously hasn't worked in the Republican primaries for Trump's last midterm candidates. But I think the $1 million question is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
No.
And I think that right now, yeah. And so the answer to that question is, look, when Biden took the oath of office, he said that he was going to make America a calmer place. He did, I guess, successfully follow through. I mean, there were things that Trump did that I think he was able to successfully carry through. That Trump, there wouldn't have been a vaccine. I think Biden did a good job of vaccinating the country, getting more people vaccinated. But then you had the war in Ukraine. You had gas prices. You had inflation. You've got a disruptive world economy now. You've got North Korea with nuclear weapons. You've got China that's spying it in our face. You've got authoritarianism rising around the world. So I think he's had successes, but it's been really poorly communicated to the American people. I don't know, the last time we talked, Lee brought up a good, everything is recorded. Why doesn't the president come in and talk to the American people in a live televised address about the Infrastructure Act, about the Inflation Reduction Act, about things? Now, maybe it's because
Inflation Reduction Act was a joke.
Yeah, well, maybe that's
because
because
to do with inflation reduction.
But the point I'm trying to make is that's the argument. He could probably pull off a victory just because it's Donald Trump. I mean,
Right.
really, I think he's the wrong
nobody likes
person.
Trump.
Steve,
so
a lot of people question the last election. Has anything been done to give people more confidence that the next election is going to be clean?
No.
I don't think I think that's all. I don't think the election was rigged.
It's
at all.
all
I mean, I
fake.
think that there's,
They
I think-
question
On that point, Lee,
Fox News question.
one of the biggest complaints from the Republican side was that the issue of mass mail-in voting. And
It's one of them.
I think one of the issues Republicans are going to have, and centre-right parties generally have this problem, is that centre-left parties generally do get more votes. If you look at any country, look at Australia with its Labor Party, they generally are going to get more votes because you have more people who are working class. You have more
Well, they're
people that
better
are
at
members
cheating.
of unions, etc., that are actually hoping that they're going to get those things that they need represented in government. So I think that I think Republicans are almost trying to keep down the turnout in order to make sure that those votes don't go their way. And I think the Republicans are going to have a wider spectrum of people that they appeal to. And that's going to mean that they need to not be quite so hardline on some issues. So, for example, Florida passed the 6-week abortion ban. That might work in Florida. There seems to be a lot of support for that in Florida, but that's not going to work nationwide. So someone like Ron DeSantis was to run for president. He's set a precedent of what he's going to do in Florida. That's not going to resonate around the country. And those are the issues that I think Republicans need to get out from under, which is what do you do about those other issues that the Democrats are talking about that you don't really have a response to?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that's something that we need to evaluate. Let's go to some other issues. We're going to come back and maybe bring some analysts. I know Congressman Nickel wanted to, come on again and talk about it. Joe Biden. The joke is he actually posted on his Facebook site yesterday that he got a colonoscopy, and I joked with the congressman off. I felt like giving him a call last night, saying, you got to quit. Aren't you already full of shit up there in Washington? You got to get a colonoscopy.
For sure.
But anyway, what I would say is Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson both fired. Interesting.
That is interesting.
I don't know details about that. I just know that that's come in as breaking news. And then a North Dakota governor is making it abortion almost illegal in North Dakota. So that's another thing that's happening. And of course,
Dakota.
you know, where Mark and I live in North Carolina, you're going to start seeing lots of changes because, you know, they no longer have a veto on the supermajority. So pretty much our governor is powerless at this point. You
Good.
can't veto any bill, but maybe it won't be as bad as other states, although it doesn't look like it's getting a little bit intense up there. You know, and I'm trying to think if there's any other news out there we want to talk about today.
I was thinking.
Well, let's deal with a couple of issues there. So, Don Lemon, I don't think any. Well, you know, people been and especially when you saw Brian Stelter and that leave CNN, you saw Cuomo leave CNN. It was pretty clear that this was going to be inevitable when he came out and made a comment about Nikki Haley being past her prime, and then he gave a lecture. I forget the gentleman's name, but he gave a bit of a lecture to an Indian American politician on the Republican side about race issues, and it just didn't play particularly well, I think. So it's pretty clear that something was going to happen with him. Tucker Carlson, that does surprise me. I think that, yes, the Dominion lawsuit was costly, but you know, he was the highest rated show on cable TV. So the fact that it's pretty clear he was fired, there's no question that he would have been fired. He didn't get to have a goodbye show, which most people would have wanted. So that's going to upset Fox's base. I'd imagine that there's going to be a lot of viewers that aren't going to want to tune into Fox. And Fox got a lot of criticism, if you guys remember, when they made the early call in Arizona in the election. A lot of people, there was a lot of backlash against them, and they started to lose some market share to some of the smaller independents. So it'll be interesting to see what Tucker Carlson does from here.
You're right. Well, no, he'll just go to one of the other conservative networks and build up their base. Fox will lose a lot of followership because of its decision, and one of the other conservative channels will build up its base because they want to listen to Tucker. So, you know, I don't think Don Lemon doesn't have the future, but Tucker Carlson does.
Tucker Carlson certainly does, Dan, but I think there's a couple of issues at play there. He would arguably make a lot more money if he was to, you know, get a sort of Joe Rogan type deal. I mean, I'd argue he'd probably earn more. He'd be worth more to a brand. But the issue is, as I understand it, maybe I'm wrong about this, he's actually going to continue to be paid for the remainder of his contract. Now, I don't know how long that contract lasts for, but the question is going to be, is he even allowed to go out there and work for a competing network, or is he under a non-compete clause for a certain period of time? Mm-hmm. So he may actually, he might only be able to go out and do a few talks here and there. Yeah, and then if he is not able to launch his own or join someone else's, let's say that he's not able to do it for 2 or 3 years. Well, what happens in 2 or 3 years? The environment has changed dramatically 2 or 3 years down the road. If you look at previous hosts like Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly, they do have some sort of presence, but they certainly don't have the pull that they used to have when they were on Fox. So I don't know. I would say, look, if he can't do anything for 2 or 3 years, what's his brand going to be? And also, I think it's worth noting that he's managed to be fired from all 3 of the major networks, but also prior to this recent show that he's had, he didn't really have great ratings. He was never a great superstar. His show on CNN wasn't great. He's just never really had a great pull until he started going down this populist sort of pathway. And when Donald Trump was running for president, became president, that's really where he got a lot of viewership. So 2 or 3 years from now, is that still going to be relevant?
Interesting questions, all.
Yeah.
What does this do to the Fox brand? What reason did they give for firing him? I haven't seen anything.
I'll give you a story about what happened.
They didn't. They didn't give one, so everyone's just speculating.
Yeah.
So here's what happened at PBS.
Maybe.
I'm doing a new show. I'm doing a new show called.
what's been interesting, I just saw a report from Australian Sky News, which is also owned by the Murdoch family, and the host of that show was actually quite critical of Tucker Carlson, and has been for a few years, especially when it came to like the election was rigged and all those sorts of claims. He said, "Look, this is just a nonsense and it's absurd." But one of the things that he said was that Lachlan Murdoch, that Tucker Carlson basically thought he was too big. He was bigger than the network. He can do whatever he likes. And Lachlan Murdoch said, "No, that's not the case. It's time for you to go." And he was sort of unceremoniously dismissed. But look, a lot of this is conjecture. Fox News has not given any formal statement other than they mutually agreed to part ways. And to my knowledge, Tucker Carlson hasn't made a public statement as yet.
There you go. I mean, it's just, we just have to wait and see. I'll tell you a story in North Carolina on PBS. I'll be actually on one of the shows this Friday, so I'll be live from PBS, but I'm also on a new show called State Line. There was a conservative talk show host named Mark Rodderman, and Mark Rodderman basically had a contract, and he used to work for Reagan, had more of a conservative show, but he would bring in Democrats as well from time to time. But renegotiated his contract. They just said they weren't going to renew his contract, but they were actually thinking about renegotiating. And he got so mad, he went on Twitter and said, "I'm not woke enough for them." And because of that, he was fired because he just pissed off everybody. And, so, and now
he hasn't woke enough for them.
But first of all, I mean, but if he had not said anything, he might not have lost the gig. So I think the key there is to take a deep breath before you hit the keyboard.
No, don't exercise your First Amendment rights in this environment. My God, why would you do that? You're going to lose your job.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's but I
it's
think
terrible.
He's filing a lawsuit, I think. So he didn't like me very much. So I'm glad. I'm sort of glad he's gone.
I can understand that, Steve.
No, but whenever I would see him, he would say, "What are you doing here?" With the scout.
Oh, that's terrible. He should be nicer.
And he was always so angry every time I ever saw him. So, but hope he's doing okay. But I don't know if he's able to find another home because he's just such a mean guy. But
well, you can't find a nicer Democrat than you, Steve.
What else are we going to talk
Nick
about?
is clearly not as nice as you.
No, I'm definitely not. I'm not a nice guy. I do think we should attempt to hire Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon and get them on.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Then we would be unfair and unbalanced.
Well, I think everybody on social media says that they should do a show together. So perhaps Pod TV can be the home of the Don and Tucker show.
Yeah, the Don and Tucker show, and see if it draws any ratings.
They'd have fist fights.
Tonight we're going to get cheesesteaks in the house to celebrate.
Yeah, well, the thing is,
his favorite food in the Oval Office, cheesesteaks.
Shaquille and I are gone. Shaquille and I will be gone from World Edition. You're going to bring in Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon.
Is that what we're going to do?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Well, I'll only be gone because I hear that there's a juicy spot 8:00 on weeknights on Fox, which is available. They're looking for a new host. They've only got a rotation of different personalities at the moment. They are going to need to find a permanent one. So maybe I'll head over there, Nick.
No, that's a great idea, Shaq.
You could be the voice of Fox. Do they listen to that in Australia? Oh, wait, it's owned by an Australian. It's infiltrated. Now, why don't they pass a bill not allowing Australians to dominate our media? I don't know. The Congress needs to really seriously look at this. We're being influenced by Australia. Hey, Shaquille,
I have to say, talking about things that are illogical. Talking about things that are illogical. If you guys cast your minds back a handful of years ago, probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. Do you remember Fox got in a whole heap of trouble for hacking phones or something? They were hacking politicians' phones and celebrities' phones or something like that, and they got in a whole heap of trouble. Or News Corporation got a whole heap of trouble in the UK. And then that flowed into America and that sort of thing. So having had that experience and knowing what they were doing to other people, what possessed the Fox News people to actually text each other and say all these ridiculous things to each other, which came out in Discovery, the Dominion lawsuit. I mean, they should have been a lot more careful about the communications they were having, you would think.
Yeah.
I got a question about anybody. Why would anyone put anything in an email or text they don't want other people to see?
I tell them that any email canon will be used against you in a court of law.
100%.
Oh yeah, no question.
But the thing is, interesting about Fox, how they made it in the United States, because they were like one of these off-brand, is they actually bought into the NFL, the National Football League, and spent billions on broadcasting the NFL. And that's how they made it here in the U.S. Then they became a major player.
And speaking of the NFL, before I leave, Aaron Rodgers retiring after 18 seasons. I knew I forgot something.
He's going to New York. He's going to fail. It's going to be horrible because he doesn't have a thick skin, and New Yorkers are just going to eat him alive. Every time he loses, they're going to be like piranhas up and down on the media against him. And he's not going to be able to win enough games for him because he'll never win enough games. So that was a bad move by Aaron Rodgers. He'll find out in about a year from now. The New Yorkers aren't kind, and they will not be kind to him. Okay.
I didn't know he was going to New York. I put in my newsletter he was retiring for the Packers, so
Yeah.
I'll have to put that
Nick,
in.
you're stereotyping.
What?
Nick, you're stereotyping New York.
No,
Are we
it's-
allowed to do that now?
I worked in New York for like 5 years. The thing is, it's not stereotype. It's like everywhere you go, you're waiting to get beat up by somebody. But and it's not personal. It's just kind of like if you live in New York City. The thing about hiring Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon, okay, for a talk show network, they would be great. So Shaquille, get your billionaire friends together and let's make a deal for these two guys. Get them on the
Yeah,
podcast.
but they're going to charge a lot of money just for a 30 minutes.
Well, he didn't charge that much. What I heard, it was only $27 million a year.
Oh, yeah, but I think that'd be worth.
I think he'd bring $27 million a year.
I think it'd be worth it, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. So the thing is, I'll put it out.
Well, I thought Tucker was on $35 million a year. So
Well, the last I saw,
I think it'd be worth it every penny of it.
yeah, that's not a bad price. He probably brings it up. And I don't know what Don Lemon gets paid, but we can find out what better. And let me tell you, how Fox News made it. They gambled on the NFL. They spent billions to get.
I want to be. Tell me, how do I join
And also,
Anderson
Fox
Cooper?
News was a player.
I want to get on CNN as an anchor.
Yeah.
Can you guys let me do that?
You can easily get on.
Why do you want to get on CNN? The communist
want to
news
come-
network.
It's a good
See?
contract. They pay me $20 million a
Well,
year.
That's the only reason why they got to buy you out. So the thing is, you just tell them, hey, look, I'll get you.
Well, yeah, but Steve, I don't think you'll earn the $20 million. I don't think you'll earn the $20 million anymore because nobody's watching CNN anymore unless they're forced to because they're stuck at an airport.
CNN's viewership is down less than 1 million. A lot of their shows, they're like 400,000, 300,000. They're not that good. And they broadcast internationally. It was one of the few ones I saw that actually compete with us internationally.
That's the thing, though. Revenue's been falling for a long time, and we also see that people are getting their news from different sources. So, if you only get 300,000 or 400,000 people watching your show, can you justify the expense as a network? Are you actually getting advertising dollars? If I was an advertiser, I think I'd rather advertise on YouTube than on a network television because at least my ads can be targeted to the audience that I want.
Yeah, there was some girl on YouTube that she was singing Fleetwood Mac song, and all of a sudden she had 7.5 million viewers and got a contract on a radio thing. And I was going, that's pretty good, though, And she's got a good voice, but you're right, Shaq.
Maybe I should try that.
Yeah,
You can do that. I think you would be great in that.
Dan Worthington, the next Justin Bieber, I can see it already.
It's a done deal.
I
I can see it as well. So I think that he would be the great Justin Bieber and everything.
Like
Hey, Shaquille,
Even Justin Bieber's not a good Justin Bieber.
Hey,
What do you
Shaquille,
mean?
I got a question for you. But before you leave, I got a question for Shaquille because he's made this offer before, but I think that he needs to put some action to his words and everything. But I do remember that you told me that you are a friend of Mark Robertson. So we need to get Mark Robertson on the network so that we can actually have a conversation with him, as he is now going to be running and is apparently the runner for governor. And I do know that you said that you could make that.
So again, our off-air conversations remain off-air, Mark. And secondly, I didn't say that I was a personal friend of his.
Right.
But obviously because I met with his predecessor Dan Forrest, I do have access to him if I need to.
But does the
What do you
world
think of Mark Robinson from what you've heard there? I mean, North Carolina is a big state. Shaquille, what have you heard of Mark Robinson in terms of his chances and
chances?
Well, I haven't looked at his chances for this upcoming thing, so I haven't really looked at it.
Recent polling has him as the front runner. He's a significant lead against Josh Stein in the head-to-head race.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So what I can tell you is from what I know about him and from what I've observed, I think he's going to be a good candidate whatever he does. I certainly think that he's been very effective as the lieutenant governor. So yeah, I wish him the best of luck. I think that he's going to be a good asset to North Carolina.
Yeah, I think he made a lot of really hateful statements that have used against him, but he's kind of backtracked from those, and he's been focusing more on working families and telling his story, which I think, quite frankly, he's done a good job of. I mean, I think he spoke well in his announcement. Stein's basically been invisible. I haven't seen him announce anything, even as the AG. So,
Steve, let me just say though, when you say he's made hateful statements, I remember when Mark Lee brought this up. And then off air, we got the tape, and I said, "Let's see the whole thing, and let's see what he actually said." And it wasn't anywhere near what had been, said, like what people representing he said. I think that people have a right to be able to have a conversation about topics that are, that are being talked about a lot, that politicians are talking about. Trans rights, abortion, race relations, all those sorts of hot button topics, without being told that if they have an opposing view to something or if they express concern about something, that is hateful speech. Okay. Oftentimes when we hear someone be referred to as a transphobe, it's not that they're scared of trans people. It's not that they are opposed to somebody living their life that way. They just have some concerns about, women's sports or, girls' locker rooms and, are opportunities being taken away from somebody in order to give the opportunity to somebody else. So, I don't think it's fair to just label or characterize something as a hateful comment just because we don't necessarily agree with the comment.
Well, that's an effective way of shutting people down. They label you, whether it's racist or sexist, what have you, into conversation. You're not worthy of talking to. Therefore, I win, you lose. That's why they do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, we need to see that stop. I was pretty disappointed with Biden's election announcement, the video where he once again made reference to MAGA extremists. I don't really think you're winning any points there. I think that if you talk to people who are independent voters, they're not necessarily considering voting for Republicans because of the extreme wing of the Republicans, just like people who are independent who want to vote for the Democrats generally aren't doing so because of the more extreme progressive side of the Democrats. They're doing it for other reasons. And so I thought that was unnecessary personally.
Shaquille, before you came on, I made a comment. I think it's pathetic. A presidential candidate has to have a recorded announcement. He can't do it live. I mean, isn't he passionate enough that he just wants to speak to the public? And was he saying timestamped? How much was it edited?
Lee, he's 80 years old. I mean,
he had to, he had to do several runs
older that are in nursing homes. I mean, so he goes to nursing homes. They're going to say, "Oh, what are you doing here?"
And he didn't have his Geritol. That was the problem.
I mean, the guy is not. Think about it. He's going to be.
So, Lee, I did hear that comment, but what is he supposed to do? He's never been the greatest public speaker, and obviously his speech is not as clear as it is today as what it was when he was the VP under Obama.
You don't
So
say.
he's really probably playing his hand the best he can. Well, yeah, but again, what's he supposed to do? He's got to play the cards he's got, and the Democrats are going to play the cards as best they can. So, they
hold the deck.
I'm probably less concerned about that. I don't like the idea there isn't going to be any. Yeah, that's something that I have an issue with. I don't like the idea that there's not going to be any debates. I didn't like seeing that with Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake, that there was not going to be a live debate. I personally think that politicians should be debating each other, and they should be able to bring up the real issues that they think are important and confront each other on their policy ideas and things like that, and actually have a proper debate. Not like a Joe Biden Donald Trump debate, that was horrible, but like a normal debate where people can exchange ideas and consider the merits of each other's arguments. I think that's a really important part of the political process, and I'd hate to see that be a trend going into the future. But I think everyone agrees.
They say, why bother? Right? Why bother with the primary if the fix is in?
Well, how is it that we still have the same two senior people, and that neither party can develop any young people to replace them? I mean, what's going on here? Why is it these old guys stomp on the young people and they don't let young people take their place? I don't get it. So I think both.
Well, when you say the fix is in, Lee,
yeah.
With them moving it to South Carolina. There are going to be people that are going to be upset by that. But what I don't recall a time that I'm aware of in American history, less than 30% of the population want him to run, and the front runner in the opposition has not much more. You got like 35% of people or something. I think Donald Trump's about 5% more. So like 70% of Americans don't want Biden to run, and 60% of Americans don't want Donald Trump to run.
Yeah,
and these are the best two candidates that the two parties can come up with. It sounds awful.
What do you guys think of a third party? Nick is familiar with what's called No Labels.
Yeah, the Unity Party.
Dave Walker, yeah.
They don't have enough traction.
You can't. It's just impossible. You can't. There's not enough money in the system to fund it.
Yeah.
I mean, the system's basically set up and corrupt. I mean, it's impossible to get anybody that has any leadership. I mean, Trump is not. He has leadership skills. He just can't shut his mouth. And he has the Republican Party kind of by the, and it's very difficult because we're kind of stuck with him as a candidate. I don't want to vote for him. I don't want him to run. But, at this point, and the Democrats have done everything they can do to discredit this poor guy.
Dan, if he would drop out, who would you support on the Republican side?
Probably DeSantis. I mean, I don't know of anybody else really.
What about Chris Sununu out of New Hampshire? He's running. It seems like.
He's a liberal.
Mike Pence is in UNC tomorrow, talking to some conservatives, youth Republicans at UNC Carolina, Chapel Hill, and he's expected to announce in a couple of weeks of whether he'll run. But I don't think he'll run.
He hasn't got a chance, and he hasn't got a chance.
He's already said. He's already said he's not running. But could you imagine being one of the students at UNC having to try and stay awake during a Mike Pence speech? I can't think of anything that would be more dreary.
But
more dreary and more boring. Look, I would have liked to have seen Ted Cruz have a go. He said he's not going to do it this cycle, but I definitely think that Ted Cruz will probably be the presidential candidate in the future. Gavin Newsom is making some interesting, interesting splashes around the country. So it'll be interesting to see if he announced presidential run.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting.
Well, one thing that I've noticed just in North Carolina that's interesting is that when you look at these Democratic candidates, I mean, let's take Josh Stein, for example. Everybody around Josh Stein, myself included, I'm 51, but most people of his advisors are in their late 50s, mid 60s, much older guard of the Democratic Party. But when you look at the Republicans in North Carolina, when I saw, like, for example, Mark Robinson's campaign, I haven't seen a person around him that's over 35 years of age. white Republicans and black Republicans and Hispanics. So I think the Republican Party, even in North Carolina, is actually using the divisions in the Democratic Party to their advantage of bringing in Democrats like Trish Cottam, right? So this is a big problem because I think going into the governor's race, Stein is resonating more with urban voters, but I don't know if he's necessarily resonating with the younger voters. But Robinson has a lot of young Republicans that are coming from the rural areas of North Carolina, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Manteo, Murphy, and I don't know. I just think this is an issue that I've observed in North Carolina, and I think that's why the Democrats keep losing statewide elections.
Any thoughts on Vivek?
What?
On Vivek, they've already on Ramaswamy. Any thoughts?
He doesn't have a chance, but he could get a cabinet position. I mean,
Why don't you think he stands a chance?
I just doesn't have. It has nothing to do with his race or his money. He has no name recognition, and it's over. I mean, the presidential race, let's just face it, is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. We just have to accept it. It's nobody's beating either one of those guys, not right now, unless Biden is calling a bluff and he's going to pull out last minute.
I'm not so sure. It'll be a long 12 months.
Well, yeah, but then the question is who's going to replace Biden if he pulls out? I mean, the Democrats have obviously done this calculation. If he pulls out, then what do? You're going to have Kamala Harris presumably is going to run. You have Gavin Newsom, who would probably beat Kamala Harris. I can't imagine there'd be anybody who wouldn't beat her. Then what the Democrats have had power for only 4 years. I mean, it's so. Look, I think the big issue that we're seeing is that there is a great divide between, and it's not just in the United States, but there's a great divide between what everyday people are wanting and needing and what's actually being offered to them by the political class.
I'd agree.
And at some point that's going to have to change, because you have special interests and lobbyists that lobby. Now, there is no such thing as a special interest group made up of people. There's no such thing as a citizens special interest group or a citizens lobby group, and so the accountability isn't there, and people really only get to ask what they want every 4 years based on a set criteria. You can choose A or B. You can choose from this buy of two parties.
Yeah, and the problem is, since our political system is so corrupt, we only get corrupt candidates. People that can play the
Except
game.
for Steve Rao.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking at the national level.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
And it's happened year after year after year. I mean, it's terrible. I don't know what the solution is to take the money out of it,
Right.
and get K Street out of it, get the lobbyists out of it. But the problem is that nobody's going to go for that because they're all on the take.
Yeah. I think that this is so much.
I think also, Dan, I'd like
in
to agree with you. Go for it, Steve.
There's too much money in the system, and I think that it's just so incredibly wrong. For the minute they get into office, they're already going out and raising more money for the next office. This is a significant problem that occurs in American politics, and I think that we have to figure out a way to change that. I don't know how you change it. I mean, unless you go amend the Constitution so that you have limit finance. Citizens versus United is what changed it all. Basically, treating corporations as people. They can give undisclosed amounts of money, as much money as they want, bought and paid for. And here we are, not even a year and a half out. We've got Josh Stein already sitting on millions of cash for his reelection for government. So it's just.
Would it help if we elected people with character?
That would be useful.
But Lee, it's not going to change.
Maybe I'm naive.
But Lee, the reality is that it's just the people with the money that win. I mean, it's You can't.
I hear you, but I don't. I hear that's what's going on. But if people with character say thank you, but no thank you, I'm not taking your loan from the mafia because I know I'm not going to be able to ever pay them back. So don't even give me a nickel. Sorry, that's the way it is. If you get in bed with the devil, you're going to lose. But just don't get in bed. Go to bed with them.
I used to think like you, but the fact is, if you're running for a higher office like governor or U.S. Senate or Congress, you need money to buy the airtime on the TV. You need money to buy airtime on the radio. How are you going to get your name out? How are you going to project? How are you going to get mail out? This is a multi-million.
But then, Steve, what you're saying is that you have a problem with citizens. You have a problem with Citizens United. I mean, look, corporations have every right to express their view. Okay, they don't actually get a vote. So, why shouldn't they be able to give money to candidates that they think are going to be good for their business?
Well, their business or their cause, but I think that it's allowed so much outside money to come in that's the point. I think Lee brings up a good point. Look, we're not going to be able to stop the money, but it should be limited from outside special interests on both sides of the camp. Left and
you're never going to stop it. You're never going to stop money under the table. The only thing you do is you have the internet now. These things go on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. They go viral. These singers, these dancers, what have you. If you get a candidate whose message resonates, forget about the billions of dollars. You can use the internet and use these social media platforms to just bypass the media and get your message out there.
Look,
I really
AOC's
believe
done
that.
a pretty good job of that.
Hold on a second. You can bypass the media, but can you bypass the lobbyists? And I think that's part of what.
Yes, you can.
But how can you? There are so many lobbyists. There are so many power groups, and
Steve, I agree with you.
On both sides, whether it's the left or the
you're
right,
Steve. I mean, Mark, you're right. But there's more citizens who vote who are not lobbyists than there are.
No, but I'm saying that they are so the congressional people. That's kind of that mire that Trump was talking about. I think Obama was talking about it as well. That they are so bought and paid for. So unless you're going to, toss them all out, which I would have no problem with, and start from scratch, how are you going to get rid of the existing system unless you do that whole?
Mark, there's a video going around. It's a few years old from Michael Moore. Why people were voting for Donald Trump as a big FU to the establishment. And I think a lot of citizens are really pissed off with what's going on with the direction of the country. And the lobbyists are not looking out for the country. They're looking out for their own.
No,
and there are more people
hang on, just
attached to a
hold
candidate.
on just a second, Lee. Lobby groups generally represent not just one company, but normally an entire industry. Okay, now, as you know,
I got you. The teachers union.
Right. Now, as you know, I serve as the president of the board of advisors for one of the chambers of commerce. By what you're suggesting, if I was to approach government, and I talk to government people all the time, if I approach government and say, look, I'm hearing from our 500,000 members that this is a common issue that they're having, and would like government to change things because it's causing an issue for these businesses. But what you're suggesting is that, someone like myself shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't be able to go and talk to government and point out where there are issues. Now, this really applies to just about every industry.
I don't have a problem with that. But lobbyists is just another form of, a political identity, identity politics. Let's divide the public into these sexes, these genders, these races, these lobbyist groups, what have you, and just take money from them. Just go after the general public.
Let's flip it to the other side then. Forget about lobby groups. What about unions then? Are you saying that unions, when they go and approach government and say, hey, look, we don't think that the paying conditions of our workers are well represented, we would like government to introduce new rules?
If they have a valid point, people should listen to them. If they don't have a valid point, you shouldn't be voting based on how much they're giving you. I know I'm naive.
Okay, but you're saying that people should listen to them, right? Sometimes you need government to change policy. I mean, I sit with unions all the time, okay, and we're on opposite sides of off the table, okay, because they're generally looking for better conditions, higher pay, and of course, businesses want to be able to reduce their costs as much as possible. So, we have to try and come to an agreement. This is really what's going to happen with lobby groups. Is you're going to have one lobbyist that's asking for one thing, and you're going to have a different lobby group who's asking for the exact opposite thing. This is a normal part of the process. I think
I got
it's
that.
easy to blame lobbyists because the lobbyists are really bad and all this money's really bad. But the issues that are being faced by the United States and other countries, I don't think it just comes down to special interests and lobbying. It comes down to the fact that politicians, like everybody else, are looking out for their own best interests, and they're going to do that regardless of whether you take the money out or you prevent lobbyists from being able to speak to them.
And unfortunately, they need the money to run. I mean, I've talked to Steve about that.
They're already in office, Nick. You mean they need the money to get reelected, not to run? They're already in office.
Money to run, and they need money to get elected, and they need money from somebody who'll donate, and the people that'll donate are
And
lobbyists.
they just can't run on the record?
The money is huge amount of money. It doesn't even make any financial sense. Steve, you were telling me what it would cost you to run for lieutenant governor. It's a huge amount of money.
Well, the reason it costs so much is because of the lobbyists putting the money in and upping the ante.
They have to
these
buy
big
media
interest
time,
groups
they
that have the big buckets of money are the ones that are driving the cost of elections up.
It's really expensive to run for office, and I think I don't even know what they pay the governor here, a couple $100,000 a year, but
It's not worth it.
They'll spend $70 million running for an office.
Yeah.
Pays them $200,000. Tell me
Right.
what makes economic
I mean,
sense.
think about everyone's mad that I'm looking, regardless of what I do in the next cycle. But listen, if I ran for the legislature, here's why I didn't go to the state house. I'd have to raise $200,000 for a job that pays $14,000 a year. Would have to quit the firm that I work for as a governmental relations special counsel because of all my, potential conflicts. It's not worth it. So my thing is, if you're going to raise,
Why are they doing it?
What?
If they're not doing it for the salary, why are they doing it?
Power.
It's incredibly powerful.
You work the system, and then you become a lobbyist.
And also when you retire, it's just like when Clinton,
Nancy Pelosi's daughter,
he makes tons of money in retirement.
Nancy and Paul Pelosi's daughter did a documentary talking about in the last election cycle, where she actually talked to many of the mega donors to both sides, both the Democrats and Republicans. One of those donors actually said that there's not enough money actually in the election cycle in the United States if you compare what is actually being raised in total by these parties and compare it to, say, the advertising money on beer. It pales into insignificance comparatively. What's more important, what brand of beer you're going to drink or who's going to run the country? So there is also an argument that there's not enough money. And because there's not enough money, there's not enough diversity of candidates and diversity of opinions that are getting airtime in the United States.
Hey, guys, I'm going to close out. Mark, it's time for my closeout because I got to run. So I want to do my last closeout, if that's okay. And I'll be back on. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close out. I'll be back on Friday live from PBS Carolinas. But I just wanted to say that this last week, and we'll be talking about it on Friday, I had the honor of spending time with His Excellency, the Indian Ambassador, Terajit Sandhu, and was able to attend a lunch with Secretary of Commerce, Michelle Sanders, in the governor's mansion. And it was amazing to hear the Indian ambassador talk about a new India, one very different from where my parents immigrated from, one where today 1.2 billion Indians have digital identity. 40% of all world payments are done just on the phone. No, even credit card transactions are taken at stores anymore. What was really amazing to me was the number of people connected on the internet. He said that there's 340,000 Indians connected in rural villages, and there was no internet access even 3 to 4 years ago. What this means is Indians that never had any education can now get online education. Recently in New York, the ambassador met someone from one of the poorest villages in India who just sold his company for $1 billion. Quite amazing, a unicorn. And he was a cab driver in India. These kind of stories are actually rising the Indian economy up, which was quite telling. And he also said that startups are growing in India. There used to be only 10,000 startups about 5 years ago. Today there's 100,000 startups, and 30 of those have become billion-dollar companies. When we asked him about foreign policy, obviously I think India is playing to the strengths of getting Russian oil, but he did value the relationship with the United States in terms of working on nuclear capabilities and threats with North Korea and China, and the importance of it. But I think that could be a focus on U.S. foreign policy from the U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, perhaps working with Modi to convince him that it is in the long-term interest of India. If they are the fifth largest economy in the world, that they could overtake China's economy, and that a relationship with the U.S. would actually make them even stronger militarily. Because let's not forget, India wants to increase their nuclear capability. That's what I was reading between the lines in the ambassador's statements. I walked away more positive on India's future. I think it's definitely something that we should be looking at anywhere in the world. India is clearly out to be the number one economy in the world. And I think that it's an economy and a power in the world that we need to be watching very closely. I want to thank the ambassador for visiting with us in North Carolina, meeting with the governor, meeting with the universities, and we look forward to, I'll be meeting him again next week when I go to Washington to meet him at a White House, at a congressional reception, where we'll be talking about foreign direct investment from India into the United States of America. From my family to yours, from our family to yours, we wish you well. Thank you all so much for being with us, and I'll see you Friday live from PBS Carolinas. Be
Take
safe.
care.
Take care, Steve.
Thanks.
I love your
Bye.
T-shirt. Be well. Take care, Dan.
Stick around to see if Shaq comes back. He's here.
I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
All right, thanks. Looks like the show's still live. They should end it, I think.
Can you reach out to Nick or Mark?
Yeah, I think we're gonna. If you want to talk, we could probably do it. Either,
I'll give you a call.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I'll call you.
it's still live. All right, thanks. Take care.
Yeah, I'll call you and I'll just call them and let them know that they're still broadcasting.
All right, thanks.